So on this slide, we watched that Father Barron video about theosis, and again, it's the idea of sharing in the divine life, not becoming divine ourselves, but having a God who wanted us to share in His divine life. That's why He gives us the sacraments, most especially Eucharist. Now, this last one here is really important. This is one that we often talk about, but one I think we often misunderstand. To be our model of holiness. A lot of people put this on the test. With that question, you were supposed to focus on St. Anselm, not on just the general idea. Why did Jesus take on human form? It's sort of like in To Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus says to Scout, well, you can't really understand a man until you walk around in his shoes. Well, he becomes a human being because he's modeling for us how we should be. But a student asked the other day after class, she said, well, Mrs. Reagan, if it says Jesus was fully human and everything but sin, doesn't that mean that He really wasn't human? He can't really understand us, because isn't it the most human aspect of us is that we sin? And here's the rub. That's what the whole thing is. Jesus is trying to tell us, no, you are not defined by your weakness and your inadequacy and the fact that you're a sinner. Jesus took on human form to say, look, you were better than this. You were created to be better than this, and I want you to be better than this, and I'm going to show you how. He takes on human form. He stands up to temptation. He's fully human. He gets tempted, but he doesn't fall for it. And He's showing us, look, guys, brothers, sisters, you don't have to be like this. I'm showing you how. And so the whole message of the Incarnation is that you can be just like that. You don't have to define yourself by sin. You're supposed to define yourself by the fact that you can be like Christ. And God, you know, we have original sin, but the thing is, the whole point of Jesus dying is He liberates us from sin. He gives us, He saves us, He gives us baptism, He gives us Eucharist, He gives us what we need to be like Him. And, you know, society wants you guys to believe that. Society wants you guys to define yourself by sin, by weakness, and think that what it means to be human is to be a sinner. But honestly, guys, what it means to be human is to be like Christ. We were created in original justice and original holiness. Jesus is giving us the model of how we're really supposed to be, how a real human acts. And, you know, we live in a society that wants you to believe that you should define yourself by things that are bad, things that are less than you. But you also live in a society that makes a lot of money off of that. Our society makes a lot of money off of tricking you into thinking that, you know, you're an animal and you have to follow your instincts and you have to have sex. No, you're not an animal. You have morals, you have consciousness, you have values. And they make a lot of money off of abortions and birth control and condoms. They make a lot of money off of drugs and making you think you're a sinner and you can't be better than that. So why not get just drunk and, you know, have that solve your problems? They make a lot of money off of selling sex and pornography and making you think, well, you're addicted to this and you can't be better than that. But Jesus came to tell you, ladies, that you can be. And I'm getting passionate now because I don't ever want you to go through life thinking you got to define yourself by your sin. You define yourself by your grace that you got upon baptism, by the fact that you're created in the image of God, and you don't have to be like that. So don't let society tell you that you need to be, because that is a lie. And remember where lies come from? We learned last chapter, the father of lies is Satan, and don't believe all this nonsense. You were made to be better than that. And don't let anyone make you think that you're less than that. And that's what Christ models for us. So, there. C'est my speech. All right. So, the last little piece here is the titles for Christ. Because the titles for Christ teach us a lot about who He is. And there's one here you'll notice that's not in your book. I just wanted to mention it because it comes up a lot. So, I wanted to talk about it a little bit. So your book talks about the titles, what they meant in the original context, and what they mean in terms for us as for Christians. So this word, Christ and Messiah, you probably already know what that means. What does that mean? What does Messiah mean? Or Christ? Yeah, anointed one. Who was that? Mackenzie? Who was it? Sorry. I just heard, I don't know. So it means anointed one. So this is Greek and this is Hebrew. It's the same word in two languages. That's kind of a W. Hebrew. That doesn't look that much better. All right. So Greek and Hebrew, it's the same word, and it's a title. It means anointed one. And in ancient Israel, prophets were anointed, judges were anointed, but then, very importantly, the kings were anointed. That was how you showed you had God's favor, and God was the one who chose the kings of Israel. So, this idea of being Messiah, it does not mean God. It is not synonymous with God. So, however, it does get associated with the king who was supposed to fulfill the prophecy. After the kingship of David, goes into obscurity, there was this idea that God promised there would always be a Davidic king. So that's where the idea of the Messiah comes from. And the Jews thought that the Messiah was going to be anointed, and he was going to be a king, and he was going to kick the Romans out. But it just means a king. It just means a ruler. So the idea of the Messiah isn't that he's God, isn't that he's going to die. It has nothing to do with salvation. It has more to do with redeeming Israel to their former state. But of course, as Christians, we have a different understanding of Messiah. We have an idea of the Messiah as a suffering servant. So, and again, so Jesus' last name is not Christ. He would have been identified as Jesus, son of Joseph. But this is a title we give him to recognize him as the Messiah, as the one who fulfilled the prophecies. Now, the title Lord, capital L-O-R-D, in the Bible stands for the proper name of God, Yod, He, Vav, He. Now, sometimes in Scripture, Lord can just mean sir. So they're saying, hey, sir, sir. But the way Jesus uses it is he definitely wants us to identify him with God the Father. He'll say things like, he'll say, like, before Abraham was born, I am. Or they'll say, are you the Son of God? And he'll say, I am. Whenever you see the great I am, he's connecting himself with the God the Father. And so this is a title that it doesn't necessarily, every time you see it, mean, well, anytime in the Old Testament, capital L-O-R-D, it's Yahweh. But in the New Testament, when we see them calling him Lord, it could mean sir, but it's also identified with God the Father and their unity. Because he often says, I am in the Father, and he is in me, and we are one, and things like that, especially in the Gospel of John. Now, Son of God, similar to Lord, Son of God can just mean someone who has God's favor. God's favor. The prophets were called Son of God. So it doesn't necessarily mean literally God's Son. But again, as we see it used in the Gospels, they'll say, when he's on trial, are you the Son of God, the Blessed Holy One? And then he'll say, I am. So then he uses God's name. So the scribes and the Pharisees are like, oh, no, he didn't. He just said he was the Son of God, and then he said he was God. Oh! They're like freaking out. And yeah, so that they saw that as blasphemy to say you're the Son of God. How can you, a human being, be the Son of God? So they weren't accepting obviously we accept this theology of the incarnation, but to say that he is literally the Son of God is quite radical. Jesus definitely means that he has a special connection between himself and God. And then finally, this isn't in your book in this chapter, but I just wanted to mention it because you'll see it in the Gospels, especially in the Gospel of Mark. In Mark's Gospel, I think up until the point he's tried, Jesus uses this title for himself almost exclusively. And Son of Man is a title that can, in Hebrew, if I remember correctly, is Bar Zanosh. N-O-C-H, I think. It can just mean human being, a son of man, because you're a human being. However, in the prophetic books, such as Daniel, especially, and I think it might be also mentioned in Ezekiel, this becomes connected up here with the Messiah. The Son of Man is a messianic figure, and by the time of Jesus' time, it gets connected with the Messiah that was supposed to come. He comes from God, and he comes to judge. And it talks about seeing him coming out of the clouds and things like that. But the term Son of Man, to the people listening to Jesus talking, if he calls himself the Son of Man, to them that's going to trigger something in their brain that's going to say he's associating himself with the Messiah. So it's a term that for us, we're like, son of man, what does that mean? But for the original hearers, that would have been something to them. They would have been like, oh, wait, he's saying he's the Messiah, isn't he? So it's a kind of a term that has a lot of value. So what we're going to do next, last chapter, I forgot to do our saints. Well, I didn't forget, we just didn't have time. So I'm going to play this YouTube video on Saint Perpetua and Saint Felicity. For each chapter, we have a saint, and don't just skip the red box they're in. Please read it, because as Father Barron said in the video, these are the people who teach us how to love like Christ. So Saint Perpetua and Saint Felicity were early Christian martyrs, and they were sentenced to death. And as we know, martyrdom happens still in our day, and it's, God forbid we have to be martyrs for our faith, but we can definitely learn what it means to truly love God when we learn from the martyrs. So I'm going to play this, and then I'll also put it on Moodle in the lesson for those who are absent. So